The train doors opened and Lydia Marston stepped into a nightmare she never saw coming. She traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man who promised her everything: security, respect, a future. But the moment Harold Bishop laid eyes on her, his face went cold as January ice. "I've changed my mind," he announced in front of the entire depot. "I no longer require a wife." Humiliated, stranded, penniless. Just when Lydia thought she'd hit rock bottom, a voice cut through the crowd like a blade, low, steady, unmistakably powerful. Cole Maddox, the most feared and respected rancher in Silver Ridge, had heard everything, and he was about to change her life forever. Stay with me until the very end of this story, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this tale of unexpected love travels across the world. The mountain wind hit Lydia Marston the moment she stepped off the train, carrying with it the scent of pine, dust, and something wild she couldn't quite name. Colorado territory stretched before her in shades of gold and purple, the Rocky Mountains rising like ancient sentinels against a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. It was beautiful, breathtaking even. It was also absolutely terrifying. Lydia's fingers tightened around the handle of her single leather suitcase, the one her mother had given her before the consumption took her 3 years ago. Everything she owned in the world fit inside that case. 2 dresses, 1 Sunday best, a hairbrush, her mother's silver locket, and the carefully folded letters from Harold Bishop promising her a new life. Those letters had been her lifeline through the darkest months after her father's death, when she'd lost the Boston boarding house to his debts and found herself with nowhere to go. Harold's words had been formal but kind. He'd described his general store in Silver Ridge, his comfortable home, his desire for a wife of good character and education. He'd sent money for her passage. He'd signed every letter with anticipation of our future, Harold Bishop. She'd read those letters so many times she'd memorized them. Now, standing on the rough wooden platform of the Silver Ridge Depot, Lydia smoothed her traveling dress, dark green wool, slightly worn at the cuffs, but clean and pressed, and searched the small crowd for the man who'd described himself as of average height, with brown hair and a practical disposition. Her eyes found him almost immediately. Harold Bishop stood apart from the others, dressed in a fine suit that looked out of place in this frontier town. He was exactly as he'd described: average height, brown hair neatly parted, features neither handsome nor homely, but it was his expression that made Lydia's stomach drop. He was staring at her with unmistakable disappointment. Lydia's hand went instinctively to her face, as if she could find whatever flaw had caused that look. She knew she wasn't beautiful, not like her sister Margaret had been, with her golden hair and porcelain skin. Lydia's hair was an ordinary brown, her figure too thin, her hands reddened from work. But she was clean, respectable, educated. She could read and write and cipher. She could manage a household, tend the sick, teach children their letters. She was exactly what Harold had said he wanted. So why was he looking at her like that? Lydia forced herself to walk toward him, her chin up, her spine straight. She'd learned early that confidence could sometimes mask fear, that dignity could be worn like armor. "Mr. Bishop?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm Lydia Marston." Harold Bishop didn't smile. He didn't offer his hand. He simply looked her up and down with the clinical assessment of a man examining merchandise he was considering returning. "Miss Marston," his voice was flat, businesslike. "I received your telegram confirming your arrival date." "Yes, I'm very glad to finally meet you in person." Lydia tried for a smile. "Your letters were such a comfort during—" "I need to speak plainly, Miss Marston." Harold cut her off, glancing around as if checking who might overhear. "Circumstances have changed since our correspondence began." The world seemed to tilt slightly under Lydia's feet. "Changed? I don't understand." "I've given the matter considerable thought during your journey west." Harold's tone was the same one might use to discuss the price of flour. "I've concluded that I no longer require a wife at this time." The words hit Lydia like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The noise of the depot, the hiss of the train, the chatter of passengers, the clatter of luggage, faded to a distant roar. You no longer—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. It's nothing personal. Harold adjusted his collar, still not quite meeting her eyes. I simply feel I acted hastily in proposing this arrangement. A man in my position should not rush into matrimony. Lydia's mind raced. She had 73 cents in her reticule, no family, no home to return to. She'd sold everything she owned to pay off her father's debts, kept only enough for the clothes on her back and the train fare Harold had sent. "But you invited me here." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "You paid for my passage. You promised—" "I'm prepared to reimburse you for your travel expenses, of course." Harold reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Here's money for a return ticket to Boston, plus an additional $20 for your trouble." He held it out to her like he was settling a business debt. Lydia stared at that envelope, at this man who'd promised her a future and was now dismissing her like a package he'd decided not to accept. Humiliation burned through her, hot and toxic. Around them, she could feel people watching, whispering. The scandal of it would be all over town by nightfall. "I see." She forced the words past the tightness in her throat. "May I ask what changed your mind?" Harold's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Lydia heard the steel in her own voice and was distantly proud of it. "I traveled 2,000 miles based on your word. I think I deserve to know why that word apparently means nothing." A flush crept up Harold's neck. "If you must know, I received a letter from a business associate in Boston. He made certain inquiries about your family, about your father's circumstances." Understanding crashed over Lydia like cold water. "My father's debts." A man of means must be prudent about the character of those he associates with. Harold's voice turned righteous. "I cannot afford to tie myself to a family with a reputation for financial irresponsibility." "My father was ill." Lydia's hands shook with suppressed fury. "He made poor decisions in his final months, yes, but I paid every cent he owed. Every single cent. I sold everything we had to make it right." Nevertheless, Harold tucked the envelope back into his jacket when Lydia made no move to take it. "I'm within my rights to reconsider. I'm sure you understand." "What I understand," Lydia said quietly, "is that you're a coward." Harold's face went red. "How dare you? You had months to make inquiries. Months." Lydia's voice remained low but cut like glass. "You could have written, sent a telegram. Instead, you waited until I'd spent everything I had, traveled across the country, and stood here in front of God and everyone to humiliate me. I don't have to listen to this." Harold turned to leave. "No, you don't." Lydia's voice stopped him. "But everyone else here will remember. They'll remember that Harold Bishop is the kind of man who breaks his word to a woman who came to him in good faith. That's the reputation you'll carry, Mr. Bishop." For a moment, Harold looked like he might respond. Then he simply walked away, leaving Lydia standing alone on the platform with her single suitcase and the ruins of her future scattered around her feet. The whispers started immediately. "Did you hear that? Poor thing came all this way. Harold Bishop ought to be ashamed. What's she going to do now?" Lydia stood frozen, her face burning, her vision blurring with tears she absolutely refused to shed in front of these strangers. She would not cry. She would not give them that. But God help her, she had no idea what to do next. That's when she heard it. "Bishop?" The voice was low, quiet even, but it cut through every other sound like a knife through silk. It carried a weight that made people stop talking, made them turn to look. Lydia turned too. The man who'd spoken was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained his work shirt and a presence that seemed to take up more space than his physical form. He wore denims, boots dusty from riding, and a dark hat pushed back to reveal sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of winter ice. Those eyes were currently fixed on Harold Bishop with an intensity that would have made a wiser man nervous. Harold, to his credit, did look nervous. "Cole, this is a private matter. You made it public the minute you humiliated that woman in front of the whole town." The man, Cole, stepped onto the platform. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable with his own strength, someone who'd never had to prove anything to anyone. "Now see here," Harold started. "No, you see here." Cole's voice didn't rise, but somehow it got quieter, more dangerous. You sent for a bride, made promises. That woman traveled 2,000 miles on your word, and now you're backing out because you're too much of a coward to admit you had second thoughts. My reasons are my own business. Your reasons stopped being your business when you broadcast them in my town. Cole took another step forward. You understand what you've done? You've stranded her here with no money, no family, no prospects. You've ruined her reputation before she even had a chance to make one. I offered her money for a return ticket. Oh, how generous. The sarcasm in Cole's voice could have etched glass. And what happens when she gets back to Boston? You think she has a home waiting, family to take her in? If she had those things, Bishop, she wouldn't have answered your damn advertisement in the first place. Lydia found herself unable to look away from the stranger who was defending her with a fury that Harold had never showed in his letters. Who was he? Why did he care? What I do is my own affair, Harold blustered, but he was backing away now. You have no right. I have every right. Cole's voice dropped even lower. Because unlike you, I keep my word. When I make a promise, I honor it. And I'll be damned if I'll stand by and watch you destroy a woman's life because you're too small to do the same. Harold's face went purple. You can't talk to me like that. I just did. Cole turned his back on Harold, dismissing him completely, and looked at Lydia for the first time. Those winter ice eyes met hers, and Lydia felt the impact of that gaze all the way to her bones. There was an intelligence there, a weighing and measuring, but also something unexpected. Respect. Ma'am, Cole touched the brim of his hat. Cole Maddox. I own the Triple M Ranch about 5 miles outside town. Lydia's breath caught. Even in Boston, she'd heard of the Maddox Ranch. It was legendary, one of the largest spreads in the territory, running thousands of head of cattle across land that stretched from the valley floor to the mountain passes. Miss Lydia Marston. She managed to keep her voice steady. I thank you for what you said, Mr. Maddox, but you needn't trouble yourself. It's no trouble. Cole glanced back at Harold, who was still standing there, looking like he didn't know whether to argue or run. Bishop, I suggest you get back to that store of yours before I lose what's left of my patience. Harold opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and stalked away without another word. Cole watched him go, then turned back to Lydia. You have somewhere to stay tonight? The question was asked gently, but it drove home the reality of her situation with brutal clarity. Lydia swallowed hard. No, I hadn't. I expected to be married and settled in Bishop's house. Cole nodded. Reasonable expectation, given the circumstances. He paused, studying her face. You have any money? Lydia's cheeks burned. Some. Not much. Family? Friends in the territory? No. Anyone expecting you back east? No. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with all it implied. She was alone. Completely alone. Cole was quiet for a moment, his gaze never leaving her face. Lydia had the strangest feeling he was seeing more than just her worn dress and her humiliation. He was seeing her, measuring something deeper. Can you cook? He asked finally. Lydia blinked at the unexpected question. Yes, I managed my father's boarding house for 3 years. I can cook for large groups. Can you clean? Of course. Mend, do laundry, basic household management. Mr. Maddox, I don't understand. My housekeeper quit 2 weeks ago. Cole spoke matter-of-factly, as if offering her a business proposition rather than a lifeline. Ran off to marry a prospector in Denver. I've got 4 ranch hands and myself living like savages out there, eating beans out of cans and letting the dust pile up because none of us know the first thing about keeping a proper house. Hope sparked in Lydia's chest, dangerous and fragile. Are you offering me a position? I'm offering you a job. Cole emphasized the last word. 3 months, to start. Room, board, and $30 a month. You'd have your own quarters in the house. Lock on the door, complete privacy. You'd cook and clean for the household, manage the kitchen garden, maybe do some mending. Nothing more, nothing less. Nothing more? Lydia had to ask, had to be sure she understood. Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those ice-blue eyes. I'm not Harold Bishop, Miss Marston. When I make an offer, I mean exactly what I say. You'd be my employee, nothing more. You'd be safe at my ranch. I give you my word on that. Any man who treated you with disrespect would answer to me. Lydia's mind raced. It wasn't what she'd come west for. It wasn't marriage, wasn't security, wasn't a home of her own. But it was work, honest work, and a roof over her head. It was survival. More than that, it was dignity. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. You don't know me. Cole was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. My mother was a mail-order bride. Came out here from Philadelphia in 1850 to marry a man she'd never met. He was a good man, treated her well, and they built a life together. Built the ranch that I run now. He paused. But she used to tell me stories about the women who weren't so lucky. Women who came west and found themselves alone, vulnerable, with nowhere to turn. She said if I ever had the chance to help a woman in that situation, I should. So I am. The simple honesty of it took Lydia's breath away. I accept, she heard herself say. Thank you, Mr. Maddox. I accept your offer. Cole nodded once sharply. Good. We'll get your things and head out. It's an hour's ride to the ranch. Ride? Lydia looked around. I don't see a wagon. That's because I rode my horse. Cole's mouth quirked slightly, the first hint of humor she'd seen from him. But we'll rent a wagon from the livery. Can't have you riding behind me on Jupiter? That'd set the gossips talking even more than they already will be. Lydia felt heat creep into her cheeks. Of course. A woman riding behind a man, clinging to him for balance. The scandal of it would be even worse than what had already happened today. I appreciate your consideration, she managed. It's practical, not considerate. Cole picked up her suitcase with ease. I don't need my new housekeeper arriving at the ranch with her reputation in tatters. Bad for both of us. He started walking, and Lydia hurried to follow. Around them, she could feel the eyes of the town following their progress. Tomorrow this would be the talk of every store, every saloon, every household in Silver Ridge. The Eastern woman who got jilted at the station and hired on with Cole Maddox. Let them talk, Lydia thought with sudden fierceness. She'd survived worse than gossip. The livery was at the end of the main street, a sturdy building that smelled of hay and horse and leather. A massive black stallion stood tied to the rail outside, and even Lydia, who knew little about horses, could tell this was a magnificent animal. That's Jupiter, Cole said, seeing her look. 17 hands of pure trouble, but he's got heart. As if in response, the horse tossed his head and snorted. Cole handed Lydia's suitcase to the liveryman and arranged for a wagon rental, conducting the business with the efficient ease of a man who was used to making decisions and having them followed. 5 minutes later, he was handing Lydia up into a buckboard wagon, Jupiter tied behind. Comfortable? Cole asked as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. Yes, thank you. He clicked his tongue, and the horses moved forward. They rode in silence through town, and Lydia kept her eyes straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the stares and whispers. Only when they'd left the last buildings behind and were heading into open country did she allow herself to relax slightly. The landscape was like nothing she'd ever seen. Rolling grassland stretched in every direction, broken by clusters of pine and aspen. The mountains rose to the west, their peaks still white with snow even in late summer. The sky seemed bigger here, wider, as if the very air had more room to breathe. It's beautiful, Lydia said softly. Cole glanced at her. You haven't seen beautiful yet. Wait until we get into ranch country. They rode for another 20 minutes in comfortable silence. Lydia found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the weathering of his skin that spoke of years in the sun and wind. He was older than Harold, maybe 35 or so, with silver threading through the dark hair at his temples. His hands on the reins were strong and scarred, the hands of a man who worked hard and didn't shy from difficulty. There was something about him that made her feel not safe exactly, but protected, as if having Cole Maddox on her side meant something in this wild country. Can I ask you something? Lydia ventured. Go ahead. What you said to Mr. Bishop about keeping your word, did you mean that? Cole didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was thoughtful. My father taught me that a man's word is the only thing he truly owns. Everything else, land, money, reputation, can be taken from you. But your word, your honor, that's yours to keep or throw away. He glanced at her. I choose to keep mine. That's a rare quality. It shouldn't be. Cole's voice held a note of anger. It should be the baseline of what it means to be a decent human being. But you're right, it's rare enough. He paused. Which brings me to something I need to say to you, Miss Marston. Lydia tensed. Yes? What I offered you is exactly what I meant. Room, board, wages, and respect. You'll work hard. I won't lie about that. Running a ranch house isn't easy, and my men eat like they've got hollow legs. But you'll be safe. You'll be treated with courtesy. And at the end of 3 months, if you want to leave, I'll pay your way anywhere you want to go, no questions asked. And if I want to stay? Cole's hands tightened slightly on the reins. Then we'll renegotiate terms. Maybe long-term employment. Maybe something else. But that's 3 months from now. For now, this is a business arrangement, pure and simple. You work, I pay. That's all. That's all I want, Lydia said, and meant it. After today's humiliation, the last thing she wanted was another man's romantic promises. Good. Cole nodded. Then we understand each other. They crested a rise, and Cole pulled the horses to a stop. There, he said simply. The Triple M. Lydia caught her breath. The valley spread below them like a painting. Rich grassland rolled toward distant mountains, cut through by a silver ribbon of creek. Cattle, hundreds of them, dotted the landscape in clusters. And in the heart of it all stood a ranch house that made Harold Bishop's town dwelling look like a shack. It was built of golden pine logs, 2 stories tall, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Outbuildings clustered nearby, a barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, and others she couldn't identify. Corrals held more horses than Lydia had ever seen in one place. Everything spoke of prosperity, hard work, and careful management. That's home, Cole said quietly. Home. The word sent a pang through Lydia's chest. She'd thought she was coming to a home today. Instead, she'd found employment. It wasn't what she'd wanted, but as she looked down at the Triple M ranch spreading before her in the golden afternoon light, she felt something unexpected stir in her chest. Not hope, exactly. Hope was too fragile, too dangerous. But possibility. Maybe, just maybe, she could build something here. Not a marriage, not a fairy tale, but a life. Her own life, earned by her own hands. It's beautiful, she said. Cole glanced at her, and for the first time she saw him smile. It transformed his face, softened those hard lines, warmed those winter eyes. It is, he agreed. Come on, let's get you settled. They descended into the valley, and as they drew closer, Lydia could see details she'd missed from above. The house wasn't just large, it was lovingly maintained. The porch railings were carved with intricate patterns. Flower boxes hung beneath the windows, though they were empty now. A stone chimney rose from one end, promising warmth in winter. Several men emerged from the barn as the wagon pulled up, wiping their hands on their pants and eyeing Lydia with open curiosity. Boys, Cole said as he swung down from the wagon, this is Miss Marston. She's our new housekeeper. I expect you to treat her with respect and mind your manners. Yes, sir, boss, they chorused. Cole came around and offered Lydia his hand. She took it, feeling the calluses, the strength. He helped her down as if she weighed nothing. Miss Marston, let me introduce my crew. That's Tom Henderson, my foreman. He indicated a lean man with gray hair and kind eyes. Miguel Santos, best horse breaker in the territory. A young Mexican man with a ready smile. Ben Worth and Charlie Mason, general hands. Ma'am. They each touched their hats, their eyes curious but not disrespectful. Gentlemen, Lydia said, summoning her dignity. I look forward to cooking for you. Cooking? Charlie, the youngest, looked like Christmas had come early. Real cooking? Not beans and hardtack? Real cooking, Lydia confirmed, and was rewarded with grins all around. Let me show you inside, Cole said, picking up her suitcase again. The interior of the house was just as impressive as the exterior. The main room was large and open, with a massive stone fireplace at one end and comfortable furniture arranged in conversation groups. The floor was polished wood, the walls hung with paintings of mountain scenes. Everything was well made, clearly expensive, and absolutely covered in dust. I wasn't lying about living like savages, Cole said with a grimace. Kitchen's through here. The kitchen was huge, with a massive cast iron stove, long work tables, and more pots and pans than Lydia had ever seen. It too was dusty and disheveled, but the bones were good. Pantry's stocked, Cole continued. We've got a root cellar and smokehouse. Chickens in the coop out back. Garden's gone to weeds, but if you want to resurrect it, feel free. I'd like that, Lydia said. Cole led her up the stairs. 4 bedrooms up here. Mine's at the end of the hall. The boys sleep in the bunkhouse. He opened a door. This was my mother's room. It's yours now. Lydia stepped inside and felt tears prick her eyes. It was beautiful. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, covered in a quilt that showed the marks of loving, skilled hands. A wardrobe stood against one wall, a washstand with a porcelain basin against another. Lace curtains filtered the afternoon light, and there, on the wall, hung a mirror in a carved frame that must have been carried all the way from the east. Mr. Maddox, Lydia whispered, this is too fine. It's been empty for 5 years. Cole set her suitcase on the bed. My mother died in the winter of '73. I couldn't bring myself to change anything. Maybe it's time someone lived here again. He crossed to the window and pointed. You can see the creek from here, and those mountains. Lydia joined him at the window. The view was breathtaking. There's a lock on the door, Cole said quietly. Keys in the top drawer of the wardrobe. You use it whenever you want. This is your space, Miss Marston. Your sanctuary. Lydia turned to look at him, this man who'd defended her honor, offered her work, and now stood in his dead mother's room offering her sanctuary. Why are you being so kind to me? She asked. Cole met her eyes. Because someone should. Because you deserve it. And because... He paused, something flickering across his face. Because I know what it's like to have the ground cut out from under you. To lose everything and have to build it back from nothing. There was a story there, Lydia realized, a deep one, shadowed with pain. Thank you, she said simply. For everything. Cole nodded once. Dinner's at 6. Nothing fancy tonight. Whatever you can throw together is fine. Tomorrow, you can start properly. He moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Marston? Welcome to the Triple M. Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs. Lydia stood alone in the room that had belonged to another mail-order bride, in a house that had become a sanctuary, on a ranch owned by a man who kept his word. She walked to the bed and sat down slowly. The events of the day crashed over her all at once. The humiliation, the fear, the unexpected rescue. She should cry. She probably needed to cry. But when she looked out the window at the mountains turning gold in the late afternoon sun, at the creek sparkling in the valley below, at this wild, beautiful country that was now her home, Lydia Marston found herself smiling instead. She'd come west for one kind of future and found another. Maybe, just maybe, this one would be better. Outside, she heard Cole's voice calling to his men, heard their laughter and the sounds of the ranch settling in for evening. She heard horses whinnying and cattle lowing in the distance. She heard life, real life, happening all around her. Lydia stood and began to unpack her single suitcase. She had work to do, a kitchen to master, a house to restore, a place to earn. And maybe, just maybe, a life to build. The sun set over the Colorado Territory, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. And in a room that had once belonged to another woman who'd come west seeking a dream, Lydia Marston took the first steps toward finding her own. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Tomorrow she'd have to prove herself, earn her place, show Cole Maddox that his faith in her wasn't misplaced. But tonight, she had a room with a lock on the door, a roof over her head, and the first real hope she'd felt in months. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was a beginning. Lydia woke to the sound of roosters crowing and men's voices drifting through her window. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory flooded back. The train station, Harold Bishop's rejection, Cole Maddox's unexpected rescue. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding, and looked around the sunlit room. Her mother's room. No, Cole's mother's room. No, her room now. The morning light streaming through the lace curtains was different from Boston light, clearer somehow, sharper, as if the air itself was more transparent. Lydia could hear the creek burbling in the distance and the low of cattle somewhere beyond the house. She dressed quickly in her work dress, plain gray cotton that had seen better days but was clean and sturdy, and pinned her hair into a tight bun. Her hands shook slightly as she fastened the buttons. This was her first morning, her first chance to prove that Cole Maddox's faith in her hadn't been misplaced. She found the key in the wardrobe drawer where he'd said it would be, solid and reassuring in her palm. After a moment's hesitation, she left it in the lock. If she was going to live here, she needed to trust that Cole's word meant something. The house was quiet as she descended the stairs, but she could smell coffee, strong and bitter, coming from the kitchen. When she pushed open the door, she found Tom Henderson, the gray-haired foreman, standing at the stove with a pot of something that looked like it had been boiled into submission. "Morning, Miss Marston." Tom touched his hat, looking embarrassed to be caught at women's work. "Didn't mean to invade your territory, just making coffee for the boys." "That's perfectly all right, Mr. Henderson." Lydia surveyed the kitchen with a practiced eye. Dirty dishes were piled in the basin, the floor needed sweeping, the stove needed blacking, but the bones were good, and she'd worked with worse. "But if you'll allow me, I'll take over breakfast preparation from here." Tom looked relieved. "Yes, ma'am. The boys usually eat around 6. We've been living on bacon and hardtack mostly, sometimes beans if we get ambitious." "I think we can do better than that." Lydia rolled up her sleeves. "How many for breakfast?" 5, ma'am. The 4 of us plus the boss." Tom hesitated. "Cole usually eats in here with us. Hope that's acceptable." "It's his house, Mr. Henderson. Of course it's acceptable." Lydia moved to the pantry and began taking stock. Flour, lard, eggs from the henhouse, bacon in the smokehouse, potatoes in the root cellar. She could work with this. "Would you mind bringing me a dozen eggs and some potatoes? And I'll need that bacon." "Right away, ma'am." While Tom fetched the supplies, Lydia got the stove properly heated and started biscuit dough. Her hands moved with the confidence of long practice, measuring flour by feel, cutting in the lard until the mixture was just right. She'd made thousands of biscuits in her father's boarding house. She could make them in her sleep. By the time Tom returned with the eggs and potatoes, she had biscuit dough resting and was slicing bacon into the largest cast-iron skillet she'd ever seen. "Smells better already," Tom said with a grin. "The boys are going to think they died and went to heaven." "Let's hope they withhold judgment until after they've tasted it." Lydia arranged the bacon in the pan, listening to it sizzle and pop. "How long have you worked for Mr. Maddox?" "Going on 12 years now." Tom leaned against the doorframe, clearly happy to talk. "Started when Cole's father was still alive. Best boss I ever had, old Daniel Maddox. Cole's just like him, fair, honest, works harder than any hand on the place." "He seems like a good man." "He is. Been through hell and back, but it hasn't made him hard. Not like some men." Tom's expression grew thoughtful. "What he did for you yesterday, at the station? That's Cole. Can't stand to see someone treated unfairly." Lydia turned the bacon carefully. "He mentioned his mother was a mail-order bride." "That's right. Lovely lady, Elizabeth Maddox. Came from Philadelphia to marry Daniel and never looked back. She loved this country, loved the ranch, loved her family fierce." Tom's voice softened. "Lost her to pneumonia 5 winters ago. Nearly killed Cole, losing her. They were close, you know. She taught him to read and write, taught him music and poetry alongside how to rope and ride." "Music and poetry?" Lydia couldn't quite imagine the hard-edged rancher she'd met yesterday reading poetry. Tom chuckled. "Don't let the rough exterior fool you, Miss Marston. Cole's got more education than most men in 3 territories. His mother insisted on it. He can quote Shakespeare and calculate compound interest, rope a steer, and play the piano." "The piano?" Lydia glanced around. "I didn't see—" "In the parlor, covered with a sheet. He hasn't played since his mother died." Tom shook his head. "Some griefs run deep." Before Lydia could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Miguel, Ben, and Charlie trooped in, followed by Cole. They all stopped short, staring at the scene before them. Bacon sizzling, biscuits just going into the oven, eggs waiting to be scrambled, potatoes ready to be fried. "Good Lord," Charlie breathed. Is that real food? It will be in about 20 minutes. Lydia kept her tone brisk and professional. Mr. Maddox, I hope you don't mind me taking liberties with your stores. Cole removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door. His hair was damp, as if he'd washed at the pump outside, and he wore a clean shirt that still showed creases from being folded. He'd made an effort, Lydia realized. For breakfast, he'd made an effort. Miss Marston, you can take any liberties you want with my stores if the result is going to look and smell like that. His eyes met hers, and there was approval there. Did you sleep well? Very well, thank you. Good. He moved to the table and sat down. The other men followed suit, clearly well-trained in ranch hierarchy. We'll eat. Then I need to ride out to check the north pasture. Tom, you're with me. Miguel, I want you working with that new mare. Ben and Charlie, we've got fencing that needs mending on the east boundary. Yes, sir, boss, they chorused. Lydia worked as they talked, scrambling eggs with butter and milk the way her mother had taught her, frying potatoes until they were golden and crispy, pulling the biscuits out just as they turned perfect brown. She arranged everything on platters and set them on the table along with butter and honey she'd found in the pantry. For a moment, the men just stared. Well, don't just look at it, Cole said mildly. Eat. They fell on the food like starving wolves, and for several minutes the only sounds were appreciative groans and the clatter of forks on plates. Miss Marston, Miguel said with his mouth half full, you are an angel sent from heaven. These biscuits, Charlie added, reaching for his third, are better than my mother's. Don't tell her I said that. Your secret's safe with me. Lydia poured coffee all around, feeling a warm glow of satisfaction. This she could do. This she was good at. Cole ate more slowly than his men, but she noticed he went back for seconds of everything. When he finally sat back with his coffee, he looked at her thoughtfully. That was exceptional, Miss Marston. Thank you. You're welcome. Lydia began gathering dishes. What time would you like lunch and dinner? Lunch at noon, if you can manage it. We usually eat something simple, so sandwiches, cold meat, whatever's easy. Dinner at 6. Cole paused. But don't feel you need to provide a feast like this 3 times a day. We're not fancy men. You're working men, Lydia corrected. You need proper nutrition. It's no trouble to cook well if I'm cooking anyway. Something flickered in Cole's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. Well then, we're lucky to have you. The men finished eating and filed out, each thanking her as they left. Cole lingered, refilling his coffee cup. Miss Marston, before I head out, there's something we should discuss. Lydia's stomach tightened. Was he already regretting his offer? Yes? My mother left a household budget book. It's in the desk in the parlor. I'd like you to look it over, see what you need for the kitchen and the house. Tom goes into town every Saturday for supplies. Just make a list and he'll get whatever you need. I can be economical. I'm not asking you to be economical. I'm asking you to run this house properly. Cole's voice was firm, but not unkind. Don't skimp on quality, and don't hesitate to spend what you need. I've let things slide too long. It's time to set them right. Lydia nodded slowly. I'll make a list. Good. Cole drained his coffee and stood. I'll be back by mid-afternoon. If you need anything, Tom will be around. He was halfway to the door when Lydia found her voice. Mr. Maddox? He turned. Yes? Thank you. Again, for this opportunity. Cole studied her for a long moment. You're welcome. But Miss Marston, stop thanking me. You're earning your keep. This is a fair exchange, nothing more. But they both knew it was more than that, much more. After he left, Lydia stood in the kitchen listening to the sound of horses being saddled, men calling to each other, the jingle of tack and spurs. Then silence as they rode out, leaving her alone in the big house. She took a deep breath and looked around. Time to get to work. The kitchen took her 3 hours to scrub clean. She washed every dish, scoured every pot, swept and mopped the floor until the wood gleamed. She organized the pantry, making notes of what was running low. She blacked the stove until it shone. She washed the windows until the morning light poured through unobstructed. By the time she finished, her back ached and her hands were raw, but the kitchen looked like it belonged in a proper home again. Next, she tackled the main room. Dust had settled on every surface like a gray blanket. She opened windows to let in fresh air, then systematically worked her way around the room with a dust cloth and beeswax polish. She swept the floor, beat the rugs outside until no more dust came out, and cleaned the windows until the mountain views were crystal clear. It was while she was polishing the mantel that she noticed the photographs. They were arranged in silver frames, and even through the dust she could see they were precious. A handsome older man with Cole's jaw and kind eyes. His father, she guessed. A woman with dark hair and an intelligent face, wearing a dress that must have been fashionable in Philadelphia 20 years ago. And one of a younger Cole, maybe 20 years old, standing with his parents in front of this very house. He was smiling in that photograph, his arm around his mother's shoulders, looking happy and unguarded in a way the present-day Cole never did. What had changed him? What had put those shadows in his eyes? Lydia carefully cleaned each photograph, handling them like the treasures they were, and replaced them on the mantel. By noon, she had lunch prepared. Cold roast beef sandwiches, pickles from the cellar, and fresh bread she'd managed to bake between other tasks. She rang the bell mounted by the back door, and within minutes the men came trooping in, dusty and hungry. "You've been working," Tom said, looking around the kitchen with approval. "A bit." Lydia set the food on the table. "It's nothing fancy." "It's clean," Charlie said with wonder. "Everything's actually clean." They ate quickly and headed back out, leaving Lydia to her work. She spent the afternoon on the upstairs rooms, making beds with fresh linens she found in the closet, dusting and sweeping until the house began to look cared for again. It was while she was cleaning Cole's room, feeling intrusive but knowing it needed to be done, that she found the book on his nightstand. She'd meant only to dust around it, but the title caught her eye. Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. A slip of paper marked a page, and before she could stop herself, Lydia opened to it. Someone had underlined a passage in pencil. "I am the poet of the body, and I am the poet of the soul. I am the poet of the woman, the same as the man." Poetry. Tom had been right. This hard-edged rancher read poetry. Lydia carefully replaced the book exactly as she'd found it, and finished her cleaning quickly, feeling like she'd glimpsed something private, something Cole Maddox might not want her to see. Dinner was her masterpiece. She'd found venison in the smokehouse and made a stew with potatoes, carrots, and onions from the root cellar, thickening it with flour and seasoning it with herbs she'd discovered dried and hanging in the pantry. She baked more biscuits and made a dried apple pie that had been her father's favorite. When the men came in at 6, drawn by the smells wafting from the kitchen, they looked like they might weep with joy. "If I'd known you could cook like this," Ben said fervently, "I'd have gone to that train station and proposed to you myself." "Ben," Cole's voice carried a warning note. "Sorry, boss. Just saying what we're all thinking." They ate with the focused intensity of men who'd done hard physical labor all day, and Lydia felt a deep satisfaction in feeding them, in seeing their pleasure in her work. This was something she understood, something she was good at. This was her value, her contribution. After dinner, the hands retreated to the bunkhouse while Cole lingered over coffee. Lydia began washing dishes, her hands moving in the soothing rhythm of familiar work. "Miss Marston." She turned. Cole was standing now, his hat in his hands. "Yes?" "The house looks—" He seemed to struggle for words. "It looks lived in again. Thank you. It's my job. It's more than that." Cole moved closer, and Lydia caught the scent of leather and pine and something else, something uniquely him. "My mother would have appreciated what you've done today. She always said a house should be a home, not just a building. You've started making it a home again." Lydia's throat tightened. "I'm glad." They stood in silence for a moment, the lamplight casting long shadows across the clean kitchen. Outside, the evening was drawing in, the mountains turning purple against the darkening sky. "I should let you rest," Cole said finally. "You've worked hard today." "So have you." "Different kind of work." He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. This is your home now, too." After he left, Lydia finished the dishes and banked the stove for the night. She walked through the house, checking windows and blowing out lamps, feeling a strange sense of belonging. This wasn't her house. She wasn't Cole's wife. She was just an employee. But for the first time since her father died, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Lydia rose before dawn and had breakfast ready by 6. She spent her mornings cleaning and organizing, reclaiming the house from years of neglect. In the afternoons, she prepared elaborate dinners and began planning improvements: curtains that needed washing, rugs that needed beating, the garden that needed resurrection. The men were unfailingly polite, treating her with a respect that bordered on reverence. But it was Cole who surprised her. He wasn't distant or cold like she'd expected a rancher to be with his housekeeper. Instead, he was present. He asked her opinion on things, listened when she spoke, treated her like her thoughts mattered. On the third evening, she was in the kitchen after dinner when she heard music, piano music, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. She dried her hands and followed the sound to the parlor. Cole sat at the piano, his long fingers moving over the keys. He was playing something beautiful and melancholy, something that spoke of longing and loss. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly with the music. Lydia stood in the doorway, transfixed. This was a side of Cole Maddox she never would have guessed existed. This artistic, sensitive man hidden inside the tough rancher. The music ended and Cole's hand stilled on the keys. He opened his eyes and saw her standing there. "I'm sorry," Lydia said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't." Cole stood, looking almost embarrassed. "I haven't played in years. Your cleaning reminded me it was here." "It was beautiful. What was it?" "Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major. My mother's favorite." He moved away from the piano, putting distance between himself and the memory. "She used to play it every evening before dinner." "She taught you well?" "She taught me a lot of things." Cole's voice was rough. "Most of which are useless on a ranch, but she insisted. Said a man should have culture as well as calluses." She was right. Cole looked at her, really looked at her, and Lydia felt something shift in the air between them. It wasn't attraction, exactly. It was recognition. The recognition of two people who'd both lost something precious and were trying to find their way forward. "Would you like to learn?" The question seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. "Learn to play?" "Why not? You work hard all day. Everyone needs something beautiful in their lives." Lydia thought of all the reasons she should say no. It was inappropriate. She was his employee. She didn't have time. She probably had no talent. "I'd love to," she heard herself say. Cole smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "Tomorrow evening, then. After dinner." That night, Lydia lay in her bed listening to the creek and thinking about music and possibilities. She'd been at the ranch less than a week, but already it felt different from anything she'd imagined when she'd boarded that train in Boston. She'd expected drudgery and loneliness and the grinding work of survival. Instead, she'd found what? Not home? Not yet, but maybe the foundation of one. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Lydia was in the kitchen making bread when she heard a wagon approaching. Through the window, she saw 3 women climbing down, each carrying covered dishes. Her stomach tightened with anxiety. She'd known this was coming, the inspection, the judgment, the weighing and measuring by the women of the community. But she'd hoped for more time. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door. The woman in front was perhaps 60, with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Marston, I'm Judith Crawford. This is Mary Henderson, Tom's wife, and Sarah Chen. We've come to welcome you properly." "That's very kind." Lydia stepped back to let them in. "Please, come in." The women filed into the kitchen, their eyes cataloging everything. The clean floors, the baking bread, the organized pantry. Lydia could almost see them forming opinions. "We brought lunch," Mary said, setting her dish on the table. She was a plump, motherly woman with warm brown eyes. "Thought you might appreciate not having to cook for once." "And we wanted to meet you properly," Sarah added. She was younger than the others, probably in her 30s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "The whole town's been talking about you." "I can imagine what they're saying." Lydia couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Some good, some not," Judith said bluntly. "That's the way of small towns. But I'll tell you what I told the gossips at the Mercantile. Any woman who can stand up to Harold Bishop the way you did has my respect. Lydia blinked. I didn't. You called him a coward to his face. Judith's eyes glinted with approval. In front of half the town. Good for you. Someone needed to say it. Harold Bishop is a pompous fool, Mary added, unpacking fried chicken. His mother spoiled him rotten, and he grew up thinking the world owed him perfection. You're well rid of him. And Cole Maddox is a good man, Sarah said firmly. Whatever arrangement you have here is nobody's business but yours and his. Lydia felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected support. Thank you. That means more than you know. They spent the next hour eating lunch and talking. The women asked about Boston, about her journey west, about her plans. They told her about the town, the families, the dynamics and politics. They were kind but not condescending, accepting her as one of them rather than judging her as an outsider. When they were preparing to leave, Judith took Lydia's hand. You're welcome at the church social next month, and if anyone gives you trouble, you tell them to answer to me. I will. Thank you. After they left, Lydia stood in her clean kitchen with the remains of a friendly lunch spread on the table, feeling something dangerously close to hope. Maybe she could build a life here. Maybe she could belong. That evening's piano lesson changed everything. Cole was patient, showing her how to position her hands, how to read the notes, how to make the keys sing. Lydia was clumsy at first, her fingers stumbling over simple scales, but gradually, with Cole's quiet encouragement, she began to feel the music. You're a natural, he said, and she could hear the surprise in his voice. Most people tense up. You're relaxed. I trust you. The words came out before Lydia could stop them. Cole's hands stilled on the keys. He turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes. Something warm and wondering, and maybe a little frightened. Do you? His voice was rough. Yes. Lydia met his gaze steadily. You've given me no reason not to. They were sitting close together on the piano bench, closer than was probably proper. Lydia could see the flecks of darker blue in his pale eyes, the lines around his mouth that spoke of smiles he no longer gave easily. Miss Marston, Cole began, then stopped. Lydia. May I call you Lydia? Of course, and you should call me Lydia anyway. We live in the same house. Lydia. He said her name like he was tasting it. There's something I should tell you. What? I didn't hire you just because I needed a housekeeper. Lydia's heart began to pound. Then why? Cole stood abruptly, moving to the window. When I saw you standing there at the station, so proud despite everything, you reminded me of my mother. She had that same strength, that same refusal to be broken by circumstance. He paused. But it's more than that now. More? I find myself thinking about you. The admission seemed dragged from him. Wondering what you think of things. Looking forward to dinner, not for the food, but for the chance to talk with you. That's not how an employer should think about his housekeeper. Lydia's mouth went dry. How do you think about me? Cole turned to face her, and the raw honesty in his expression took her breath away. Like a man thinks about a woman he's starting to care for. The words hung in the air between them. I know I shouldn't, Cole continued. You came here for safety, for work. The last thing you need is another man making unwanted advances. Who says they're unwanted? The question surprised them both. Lydia stood, her hands trembling slightly. I think about you too, Cole. I watch you work and wonder what made you so careful with your kindness. I hear you play piano and want to know what hurts you're trying to heal. And when you smile, really smile, I feel like the sun came out. Cole crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that Lydia had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. This changes everything, he said softly. Does it have to? Lydia, if this goes wrong, you could be hurt. You could lose your position here. I won't let that happen. So we're careful. Lydia found courage she didn't know she possessed. We take our time. We see where this goes. But Cole, don't ask me to pretend I don't feel what I feel. I spent too many years pretending to be what my father needed, what Boston society expected. Out here, in this wild country, I want to be honest. Even if it's frightening. Cole reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his calloused hand. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if she were something precious. "You're remarkable," he whispered. "Do you know that?" Before Lydia could answer, before she could think or doubt or hesitate, Cole lowered his head and kissed her. It was soft, questioning, sweet beyond measure. His lips were warm and careful, asking permission even as they claimed it. Lydia's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart under her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I should apologize," he said. "Don't you dare." He laughed, the sound rusty as if he'd forgotten how. "What am I going to do with you?" "Figure it out as we go." Lydia stepped back reluctantly. "But Cole, I need you to understand something. I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break if this doesn't work out. I'll be fine because I've always been fine, but I won't live in fear of possibility." "Fair enough." Cole's eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. "Then let's see where this road takes us." They stood in the lamplight, the piano silent behind them, and Lydia felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She wasn't the desperate mail-order bride who'd stepped off the train. She wasn't Harold Bishop's rejected goods. She was Lydia Marston, housekeeper and piano student, and maybe, just maybe, something more to the man who'd saved her. Whatever came next, she'd face it with her eyes open and her heart ready. The next 3 weeks passed in a haze of discovery and careful courtship. Cole and Lydia moved around each other with the delicate awareness of two people learning a new dance. Each step measured, each touch deliberate. They maintained propriety in front of the ranch hands, but in the quiet moments after dinner, when the house settled into evening stillness, they sat together at the piano or on the porch, talking until the stars filled the sky. Lydia learned that Cole had fought in the war, that he'd come home to find his father failing and the ranch struggling. She learned that he'd rebuilt everything from near ruin, working 18-hour days until his hands bled, driven by a promise to his dying father that he'd keep the Maddox legacy alive. She learned that he read poetry because his mother had read it to him as a child, and that music was the only thing that quieted the nightmares that still sometimes woke him in the dark hours before dawn. Cole learned that Lydia had nursed her father through 2 years of slow decline, watching him fade away piece by piece while the debts mounted and the boarding house emptied. He learned that she'd sold her mother's jewelry, her sister's piano, everything of value to pay what was owed, choosing honor over comfort. He learned that she was stronger than she looked, braver than she knew, and that her laughter, when she finally felt safe enough to let it out, was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. They didn't speak of love. It was too soon, too fragile. But Lydia saw it in the way Cole's eyes followed her across a room, heard it in the gentleness of his voice when he said her name, and she felt it growing in her own heart, taking root like the garden she was slowly bringing back to life. The garden had become her sanctuary. Every afternoon, after lunch was cleared and the kitchen scrubbed, Lydia worked among the weeds and neglected beds, coaxing life back into soil that had been left to go wild. She planted late-season vegetables, pruned back overgrowth, discovered perennials that Elizabeth Maddox had planted years ago, still struggling to survive. There were roses that bloomed despite neglect, lavender that scented the air when she brushed against it, herbs that would flavor winter stews. It was while she was working in the garden one afternoon, her hands deep in rich earth, that she heard the thunder of approaching horses. Not the usual sound of Cole and the hands returning from work, but something faster, more urgent. Lydia stood, shading her eyes against the September sun. 3 riders were coming hard toward the ranch, dust billowing behind them. As they drew closer, she recognized Tom in the lead, his face grim. They pulled up near the barn, and Lydia hurried over, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. "Tom? What's happened?" "Rustlers hit the north pasture." Tom swung down from his horse, breathing hard. "Got away with maybe 50 head, shot 2 of our steers just for meanness. Cole's up there now with Miguel and Ben, tracking them." Lydia's blood ran cold. "Shot? Is anyone hurt?" "No, ma'am, but Cole sent me back to warn you. These men might circle around, might try to hit the ranch itself. He wants you inside with the doors locked until we know they're gone." "Inside? While you're all out there?" "Miss Marston." Tom's voice was firm. Cole was very clear. "You're to stay in the house, armed if you know how to shoot, and not open the door for anyone except us. These aren't ordinary thieves, they're dangerous men. Lydia wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in Tom's eyes, the tension in his shoulders. This was serious. I can shoot, she said quietly. My father taught me. Where are the guns? Tom looked relieved. Office, behind the desk. Shotgun and a rifle, both loaded. You know how to use a shotgun? Yes. Good. It's more forgiving than the rifle at close range. He was already moving toward the barn. I'm taking a fresh horse and heading back out. Charlie's going to stay within earshot of the house, watching the approach. You see anyone you don't recognize, you shoot first and ask questions later, understand? Lydia nodded, her mouth dry. Be careful. Yes, ma'am. Tom paused, looking at her intently. Cole would never forgive himself if anything happened to you. You stay safe, you hear? Then he was gone, riding hard back the way he'd come, and Lydia was alone with the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She went inside and found the guns where Tom had said they'd be. The shotgun was heavy in her hands, solid and deadly. She checked the load, made sure she remembered how it worked, then carried it to the kitchen. If trouble came, that's where she'd be, where she could see both the front and back approaches. The afternoon stretched endlessly. Lydia tried to keep busy, preparing dinner even though her hands shook, checking the windows every few minutes. Outside, she could see Charlie on his horse, circling the property in a wide patrol. The sun moved slowly across the sky, shadows lengthening and still no word. She thought of Cole out there tracking dangerous men, and fear closed around her heart like a fist. In 3 weeks, he'd become essential to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The thought of him hurt, bleeding, or worse, made her physically ill. Please. She prayed to a God she wasn't sure was listening. Please keep him safe. The sun was touching the mountains when she heard it, the crack of distant gunfire, sharp and unmistakable. Then another shot, and another, a brief flurry that echoed across the valley. Lydia gripped the shotgun, her heart hammering, and moved to the window. Charlie had stopped his patrol and was staring toward the north, tension visible in every line of his body. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it started, and then there was only silence, terrible and complete. Minutes crawled past like hours. Lydia found herself praying again, bargaining with God the way she had when her mother was dying, when her father was slipping away. Just let him be all right. I'll ask for nothing else. Just let him be all right. Darkness was falling when she finally heard horses. Not the thunder of before, but a slower pace, weary. Lydia ran to the front porch, shotgun still in her hands, and saw them coming up the road. Cole was in front, sitting his horse like he was carved from stone. Behind him came Tom and Miguel, leading 2 riderless horses with bodies slung over the saddles. Ben brought up the rear, one arm held awkwardly against his side. Lydia's breath caught. Ben's hurt. She was down the steps before she thought about it, running toward them. Cole dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, and Lydia saw blood on his shirt, dust and sweat caking his face. You're hurt, she said, reaching for him. It's not my blood. Cole's voice was rough, exhausted. Ben took a bullet in the shoulder. We need to get him inside. They got Ben down from his horse and into the house, Miguel supporting him on one side, Cole on the other. Lydia ran ahead, clearing the kitchen table, grabbing clean towels and her sewing kit. She'd nursed her father through illness, had tended enough wounds in the boarding house to know what needed doing. Put him here, she directed, and they laid Ben on the table. His face was gray with pain, his shirt soaked with blood. The bullet went clean through, Cole said, carefully cutting away Ben's shirt. He's been lucky, but he's lost blood. Lydia looked at the wound front and back and felt her stomach settle into the calm competence of necessity. I need hot water, clean cloths, and whiskey. Miguel, can you get those? Yes, ma'am. She turned to Ben, taking his good hand. This is going to hurt, but I promise to be as quick as I can. Just don't let me die without tasting your cooking again, Ben said with a weak attempt at humor. You're not dying today. Lydia squeezed his hand. Cole, I need you to hold him still. For the next hour, Lydia worked with steady hands, cleaning the wound, stitching torn flesh, binding it tight to stop the bleeding. Ben passed out halfway through, which was a mercy. Cole stayed beside her the entire time, following her directions without question, his presence a solid anchor. When it was done, Ben was pale but breathing steadily. The bleeding stopped. They carried him upstairs to one of the spare rooms, and Lydia sat beside him until she was satisfied his color was improving. Only then did she allow herself to leave, to find Cole waiting in the kitchen, slumped at the table with his head in his hands. Cole. He looked up, and Lydia saw the exhaustion in his face, the weight of responsibility and violence. Without thinking, she went to him, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I thought... His voice broke. When the shooting started, all I could think was that they might get past us, might make it here, might hurt you. I'm fine, I had the shotgun, I would have fought. Cole pulled back to look at her, and there was something fierce and possessive in his eyes. I know you would have. That terrifies me almost as much. His hands came up to frame her face. Lydia, I need to tell you something. What? I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and utterly unexpected. I know it's too soon, Cole continued, the words tumbling out now. I know we agreed to take this slow, but out there today, tracking those men, all I could think was that I'd wasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of careful courtship when I should have told you from the start that you're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep. That your voice is the sound I most want to hear, your face, the sight I most want to see. Lydia's vision blurred with tears. Cole, let me finish. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. I don't want you as my housekeeper, Lydia. I want you as my wife. I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build a future with you, fill this house with laughter and love and maybe children if we're blessed. I want everything, and I want it with you. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Cole went very still. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Lydia smiled through her tears. I've been in love with you since that first piano lesson, maybe since the moment you stood up for me at the train station. I just didn't let myself believe it could be real. It's real. Cole lowered his head, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't soft or questioning. It was claiming, celebrating, promising everything words couldn't express. Lydia melted into him, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, tasting dust and desire and devotion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I need to do this properly, he said. Ask you properly. You just did. No. Cole stepped back and, to Lydia's shock, dropped to one knee. He took her hand in his, and she could feel the calluses, the strength, the slight trembling that betrayed his emotion. Lydia Marston, you came into my life when I'd forgotten what it meant to hope. You brought light into this house, into my heart. You're brave and kind and stronger than you know. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for whatever time we're given? Lydia dropped to her knees in front of him, uncaring of propriety or dignity. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They knelt there on the kitchen floor, holding each other as if they were the only solid things in a shifting world. Outside, night had fully fallen, and somewhere in the bunkhouse, the ranch hands were settling in. Upstairs, Ben slept the sleep of the wounded and healing. But in the kitchen, in the heart of the house that Elizabeth Maddox had made a home, her son found the courage to love again. I don't have a ring, Cole said against her hair. I'll get you one, the finest I can find. I don't need a ring. Lydia pulled back to look at him. I need you, that's all. You'll have me. Cole's smile was radiant, transforming his face. For the rest of our lives, you'll have me. They stayed there until Tom knocked on the door, calling that the horses needed tending and did they want help with anything. Cole reluctantly released Lydia and went to deal with the aftermath of the day. The dead rustlers to be turned over to the sheriff, the stolen cattle to be recovered, Ben to be checked on. Lydia stood alone in the kitchen, her hands pressed to her heart, feeling it beat wild and joyful against her ribs. She was going to marry Cole Maddox. She was going to build a life here, in this house, on this land. She was going to belong somewhere, to someone, in a way she'd never dared dream possible. Later, after the household had settled and Ben was sleeping peacefully, Cole found her on the front porch watching the stars. He settled beside her on the steps, close enough that their shoulders touched. I want to show you something, he said quietly. Now? Now. He stood and offered his hand. Trust me? Lydia took his hand. Always. He led her away from the house, past the barn and the corrals, following a path that wound along the creek. The moon was bright enough to see by, turning the landscape silver and strange. They walked in silence for perhaps 10 minutes before Cole stopped. There, he said simply. Lydia looked and caught her breath. In a small clearing by the creek, where the mountains rose dramatic against the star-filled sky, stood the frame of a house. It was small, maybe 4 rooms, but beautifully proportioned. The logs were fresh-cut pine, golden even in the moonlight. The windows were already framed, and she could see where a porch would wrap around the front. I started building it 2 weeks ago, Cole said quietly. After that first piano lesson, when I knew I was falling for you, Tom and the boys have been helping me during lunch breaks and in the evenings. He turned to face her. I wanted to have something to offer you besides a room in my mother's house. I wanted to build something that was ours, just ours. Lydia walked forward slowly, running her hand along the smooth logs. The craftsmanship was beautiful. Each joint fitted perfectly, each detail considered. This wasn't thrown together hastily. This was built with love. It's perfect, she whispered. Not yet. Cole came to stand beside her. But it will be. Another month, maybe 2, and it'll be finished. We can be married then, move in here, start our life together in a home I built for you. Lydia turned to him, seeing him outlined in moonlight. This man who'd defended her honor, given her work, taught her piano, and now offered her everything. Can we be married sooner? Cole's eyebrows rose. Sooner? I thought women liked time to plan. I don't need time. I don't need a big wedding or fancy dress. Lydia took his hands. I just need you. We can live in the big house until this one is finished, but Cole, I don't want to wait. Life is too uncertain, too precious. Today proved that. He studied her face in the moonlight, and whatever he saw there made him smile. How soon? As soon as we can arrange it. Next week? 2 weeks? Next week. Cole pulled her close. I'll ride into town tomorrow and talk to the preacher. We'll do it simple, just family and close friends. Is that all right? It's perfect. They stood in the clearing by the creek, wrapped in each other's arms, and Lydia felt peace settle over her like a benediction. This was where she was meant to be. This wild, beautiful country, this good man, this life they would build together. Lydia? Cole's voice was soft against her hair. Yes? I need you to understand something. Today, when we went after those rustlers, it was ugly. Violence is always ugly. There will be more days like this. More danger, more fear. Ranch life isn't easy, and it's not always safe. I know. And you're still willing? Lydia pulled back to look him in the eyes. Cole Maddox, I traveled 2,000 miles into the unknown for a man I'd never met, hoping to find a decent life. Instead, I found you. Do you really think a little danger is going to scare me away now? He laughed, the sound full of relief and joy. What did I do to deserve you? You stood up when another man sat down. You offered honor when I'd been shown contempt. You saw me, Cole. The real me. Not what I could do for you or what you wanted me to be, just me. I'll keep seeing you, he promised. Every day for the rest of our lives, I'll see you. They walked back to the house hand in hand, planning their wedding, their future, their life. They talked about children they might have, improvements they'd make to the ranch, dreams they'd each carried secretly and could now share freely. The next morning, the ranch was subdued. The events of the previous day hung heavy over breakfast, and even Lydia's cooking couldn't completely lift the mood. Ben was awake, but weak, confined to bed for at least a week. The 2 dead rustlers had been the leaders of a gang that had been terrorizing ranches across 3 territories. The sheriff, when Cole rode in to report, was relieved they were dead, but warned that the rest of the gang might seek revenge. I've arranged for 2 more hands to come out from town, Cole told Lydia after he returned. Just temporarily, until we're sure the threat has passed. I'm also having Charlie stay in the bunkhouse closer to the main house. I want you protected. I can protect myself. I know you can. Cole touched her face gently. But humor me, please. After yesterday, I don't want to take any chances. Lydia relented, understanding his need to feel he was keeping her safe. Did you speak to the preacher? I did. Cole's expression lightened. He can perform the ceremony a week from Saturday. Is that soon enough? It's perfect. Word spread quickly. Judith Crawford appeared the next day with Sarah Chen and Mary Henderson, armed with fabric and measuring tapes and determination. You're not getting married in a work dress, Judith announced. We're making you a proper wedding gown. I don't need... Child, every woman needs a wedding gown. Mary's voice was firm. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it should be special. Now stand still and let us measure. Over the next week, the ranch became a hive of activity. The women came every afternoon, sewing in the parlor while Lydia worked in the kitchen. Cole and the hands worked on finishing the new house, determined to have at least the exterior complete before the wedding. Ben recovered slowly, well enough by midweek to sit on the porch and supervise, offering commentary that made everyone laugh. The dress took shape beneath skilled hands. It was simple but beautiful, made of cream-colored muslin with lace at the collar and cuffs. Sarah embroidered wildflowers around the hem, mountain flowers that grew wild in the meadows. Judith fashioned a veil from gossamer fabric, saying every bride needed a veil to be properly married. Lydia tried it on the day before the wedding and caught her breath. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the desperate, humiliated creature who'd stepped off the train 6 weeks ago. This woman stood straight and proud, her eyes bright with joy, her face radiant with love. You look beautiful, Sarah said softly. I feel beautiful. Lydia touched the delicate lace. Thank you, all of you, for everything. We're glad to help. Mary squeezed her hand. You're one of us now. Family. Family. The word brought tears to Lydia's eyes. She'd lost her family, thought she'd never have another. But here, in this unlikely place, she'd found belonging. The night before the wedding, Cole knocked on her bedroom door after dinner. Can we talk? He asked when she opened it. Of course. Lydia stepped back to let him in, then hesitated. Is it bad luck for you to see me the night before? Maybe. But I need to give you something, and I don't want to wait. Cole pulled a small box from his pocket. I know you said you didn't need a ring, but I wanted you to have this. He opened the box, and Lydia gasped. Inside was a simple gold band with a single small diamond, the setting worn smooth with time. It was my mother's, Cole said quietly. My father gave it to her the day they married. She wore it every day until she died. I'd like you to have it, if you're willing. I know it's not new, not fancy. It's perfect. Lydia lifted the ring carefully, seeing the love worn into every scratch and mark. Are you sure? I'm sure. My mother would have loved you, Lydia. She would have been so happy that I found you. Cole took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. There. Now you're officially mine. I was already yours. Lydia looked down at the ring, at this tangible connection to the woman who'd made this house a home, who'd taught her son to be the man he was. Thank you. I'll treasure it. Cole pulled her close, and they stood together in the lamplight, the eve of their wedding wrapping around them like a promise. Tomorrow, they would stand before God and the community and pledge their lives to each other. Tomorrow, they would become husband and wife, partners in all things. But tonight, they simply held each other and let the anticipation build, knowing that everything was about to change, everything was about to begin. I love you, Cole whispered against her hair. I love you too. Lydia tilted her face up to his. Tomorrow can't come soon enough. Tomorrow, Cole agreed, and kissed her with a tenderness that promised forever. When he finally left, Lydia stood at her window, looking out at the mountains silvered by moonlight, at the creek running bright and cold, at the partially finished house that would soon be her home. In just a few hours, she would walk down the aisle and become Mrs. Cole Maddox. She would belong here, truly belong, in a way that went deeper than employment or gratitude. She would belong through love, and that made all the difference. Morning came with golden light spilling through the lace curtains, and Lydia woke with her heart already racing. Her wedding day. The words felt surreal even as she thought them, as impossible as they were wonderful. She dressed carefully in her chemise and wrapper, then sat at the vanity Elizabeth Maddox had once used, brushing her hair with slow meditative strokes. Outside her window, she could hear the ranch coming to life. Men calling to each other, horses whinnying, the everyday sounds that had become the music of her new life. A soft knock at the door made her turn. "Come in." Sarah, Mary, and Judith entered, their arms full of flowers and fabric, their faces bright with excitement. "The bride can't dress herself on her wedding day," Mary announced, setting down a basket of wildflowers. "That's what friends are for." They fussed over her for the next hour, arranging her hair in soft waves that fell down her back, weaving tiny white flowers through the strands. The dress slipped over her head like a dream, the fabric cool and smooth against her skin. Sarah fastened the dozens of tiny buttons down the back, while Judith adjusted the lace collar. "There's something old," Judith said, touching the ring on Lydia's finger that had belonged to Cole's mother. "And something new." She produced a delicate handkerchief edged in lace. "I embroidered it last night, your initials, though they'll be different by sunset." Lydia took the handkerchief, seeing her initials intertwined with Cole's in elegant script. "It's beautiful. Thank you." Something borrowed. Mary unfastened a simple pearl necklace from around her own neck. "Tom gave this to me on our wedding day 20 years ago. It's brought me nothing but happiness. I'd like you to wear it." "And something blue." Sarah tied a blue ribbon around Lydia's wrist. "For faithfulness and love." Lydia looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked radiant, transformed, as if happiness had given her a beauty she'd never possessed before. "Oh, child," Mary whispered, her eyes bright with tears. "You look like an angel." "I feel like I'm dreaming." Lydia touched the flowers in her hair gently. 6 weeks ago, I was standing at the train station with nothing. Now I have everything." "You have what you deserve," Judith said firmly. "A good man, a good home, a good life. Don't ever forget that you're worthy of all of it." A knock on the door interrupted them, and Tom's voice called from the hallway. "Miss Marston, the guests are arriving. Cole sent me to tell you he's waiting at the church." The church was actually the town's small schoolhouse, transformed for the occasion with pine boughs and wildflowers. The entire community had turned out despite the short notice, curious to see the mail-order bride who'd captured Cole Maddox's heart. Lydia could feel their eyes on her as Tom drove the wagon into town, could sense the whispers and speculation. Let them talk, she thought. Let them wonder. I know the truth of what Cole and I have. The schoolhouse was packed when they arrived. Ranchers and their families, shopkeepers, farmers, even Harold Bishop standing in the back looking sour and uncomfortable. Lydia felt a moment of savage satisfaction seeing him there, seeing him witness what he'd thrown away. But then Cole stepped out from the front of the room, and every other thought fled from her mind. He wore a new suit, dark and well-fitted, with a white shirt and a string tie. His hair was freshly cut, his jaw clean-shaven. But it was his eyes that captured her, those winter blue eyes that looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever spoken. Tom helped her down from the wagon, and Sarah appeared to hand her a bouquet of wildflowers tied with ribbon. Then the door opened, and someone began playing the piano, a simple, sweet melody that made tears spring to Lydia's eyes. "That's the song Cole's mother used to play," Mary whispered. "He taught it to the school teacher last week, so she could play it for you today." Lydia walked down the makeshift aisle on Tom's arm, past faces she was beginning to know, past people who were becoming her community. But she only had eyes for Cole, for the way his expression softened when he saw her, for the slight trembling of his hands as he reached for hers. The preacher was a kind-faced man named Reverend Matthews, who'd known Cole since he was a boy. He smiled at them both, then addressed the congregation. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Cole Daniel Maddox and Lydia Rose Marston in holy matrimony." His voice was warm and strong. "Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted by God." Lydia barely heard the words. She was lost in Cole's eyes, in the way his thumb stroked gently across her knuckles, in the certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. "Cole," Reverend Matthews said, "do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poor, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do." Cole's voice was steady, clear, certain. "I absolutely do." "And Lydia, Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? Lydia met Cole's eyes and smiled. I do. The rings, please. Tom stepped forward with a second ring, a mate to the one Lydia already wore. Cole took it and slid it onto his own finger, then took Lydia's hand again. I give you this ring as a symbol of my love, he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. With this ring I thee wed. Lydia's voice trembled but held. I give you this ring as a symbol of my love. With this ring I thee wed. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, Reverend Matthews declared, his face breaking into a broad smile, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Cole, you may kiss your bride. Cole cupped Lydia's face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle, and kissed her as if they were the only two people in the world. The schoolhouse erupted in applause and cheers, but Lydia heard none of it. There was only Cole, only this moment, only the beginning of everything they would become together. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Mrs. Maddox, he whispered. Mr. Maddox, she replied, testing the sound of it, loving the way it felt on her tongue. The celebration that followed was boisterous and joyful. Tables had been set up outside the schoolhouse laden with food that the community had brought. Roasted chickens and beef, fresh bread and butter, pies and cakes of every description. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon music filled the air as couples began to dance in the dusty street. Cole led Lydia into the first dance, holding her close as they swayed to a waltz. She could feel the strength of him, the solid reality of his body against hers, and marveled that this man was now her husband. Are you happy? He asked softly. I didn't know it was possible to be this happy. Lydia leaned her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. Thank you for choosing me. I think you chose me, Cole said. That day at the station when you called Harold Bishop a coward, that's when I knew you were brave enough to build a life out here. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite it. Cole pressed a kiss to her temple. You're the bravest woman I've ever known. They danced until the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. People began to drift away, calling out congratulations and blessings. Tom approached with a knowing smile. The wagon's ready when you are, boss. I've already taken your things out to the new house. Lydia blinked. The new house? But it's not finished. Finished enough. Cole's eyes sparkled with mischief and promise. One bedroom, fully furnished, a kitchen with a stove, a porch to watch the sunset. That's all we need for tonight. Heat flooded Lydia's cheeks as she understood what he was saying. Tonight, they would go to their own home, their own bed. Tonight, they would truly become husband and wife in every sense of the word. Cole helped her into the wagon, and they rode out of town with tin cans tied to the back by well-meaning friends, clattering and announcing their newly married state to the world. The sun was setting in earnest now, turning the mountains purple and the valley floor golden. When they reached the clearing by the creek, Lydia caught her breath. The house was complete, at least from the outside. Smoke rose from the chimney and lamplight glowed in the windows. Someone, Tom, probably, had strung wildflowers along the porch railing. Welcome home, Mrs. Maddox. Cole swung down and came around to help her from the wagon. But instead of setting her on her feet, he swept her up into his arms. Cole, Lydia laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. What are you doing? Carrying my bride over the threshold. It's tradition. He climbed the porch steps and kicked open the door. And I'm a traditional man. The interior of the house took Lydia's breath away. It was small but perfect, with honey-colored pine walls and wide windows that would fill the space with light during the day. A stone fireplace crackled with a welcoming fire. The kitchen area held a gleaming new stove and a small table set for two, and through an open doorway, she could see the bedroom with its large bed covered in a beautiful quilt. Cole set her gently on her feet but kept his arms around her waist. Do you like it? I love it. Lydia turned in a slow circle, taking in every detail. It's perfect, Cole. How did you do all this in just a week? I had help. Tom, Miguel, even Ben hobbled over from the main house to lend a hand. Cole moved to the table, where a bottle of wine and 2 glasses waited. The furniture was my mother's, stored in the attic of the main house. The quilt was made by Judith and her sewing circle. Everyone wanted to contribute something. We're very lucky. Lydia accepted the glass of wine he poured. To be so loved by so many. To being loved. Cole touched his glass to hers, his eyes holding promises that made her pulse quicken. And to loving. They sipped the wine standing by the fireplace, watching the flames dance and feeling the momentousness of the occasion settle around them. This was their wedding night, the beginning of their married life, and suddenly Lydia felt nervous in a way she hadn't all day. Cole must have sensed it because he set down his glass and took her hand. Lydia, we don't have to do anything you're not ready for. We can just sleep, talk, get used to being married. There's no rush. I want to. Lydia met his eyes directly. I want you. I've never... Understanding dawned in Cole's face, followed by tenderness so profound it made Lydia's throat tighten. I'll be gentle, I promise. And if you want to stop at any time, we stop. No questions, no pressure. I trust you. And she did, completely and absolutely. Cole led her to the bedroom where someone had scattered rose petals across the bed and left more candles burning. The flickering light cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere both intimate and otherworldly. Let me, Cole said softly, and began unfastening the tiny buttons down the back of her dress with infinite patience. His fingers were warm against her skin, and Lydia shivered at the contact. The dress fell away, followed by her petticoats and corset, until she stood in just her chemise. She should have felt vulnerable, exposed, but Cole's eyes held such reverence that she felt beautiful instead. You're perfect, he whispered, running his hands down her arms. Absolutely perfect. Your turn. Lydia reached up to unknot his tie with trembling fingers. He helped her with his jacket, his vest, his shirt, until the broad expanse of his chest was revealed. Lydia placed her palm over his heart, feeling it pound beneath her touch. They came together slowly, learning each other through kiss and caress, building heat gradually until it burned bright and urgent. Cole was true to his word, gentle and patient, making sure she was ready before taking things further. When they finally joined together, Lydia felt a moment of sharp discomfort, followed by a sense of completion so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Okay? Cole asked, holding himself very still. More than okay. Lydia wrapped her legs around him, pulling him closer. Don't stop. What followed was a dance older than words, a coming together that was both physical and spiritual. Cole whispered her name like a prayer, told her she was beautiful, told her he loved her with every breath. Lydia discovered that her body knew things her mind had never learned, that pleasure could build and build until it shattered into something beyond description. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath the quilt, skin cooling in the night air, hearts gradually slowing to normal rhythms. Cole pulled her close, her head on his chest, his hand stroking lazy patterns on her back. I love you, he said into the darkness. I love you too. Lydia pressed a kiss over his heart. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for trusting me. Cole tightened his arms around her. This is just the beginning, you know. We have a whole lifetime to learn each other. I can't wait. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and the knowledge that they belonged together. Outside, the creek sang its eternal song, and the mountains stood sentinel over the valley. Inside the small house by the water, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds began their life together. Lydia woke in the pearl-gray light of dawn to find Cole already awake, watching her with an expression that made her heart turn over. Good morning, Mrs. Maddox. Good morning, husband. She smiled, loving the way the word felt. Did you sleep? Some. Cole traced the line of her jaw with one finger. Mostly I watched you sleep and tried to convince myself this was real. It's real. Lydia captured his hand and brought it to her lips. We're real. They made love again in the morning light, slower this time, learning what brought pleasure. what made the other gasp and arch and cry out. Afterward, Cole cooked breakfast, eggs and bacon and toast that was only slightly burned, while Lydia wrapped herself in his shirt and watched him work. "This is domestic," she teased. "Get used to it. When we're here, in our house, I'm going to take care of you as much as you take care of me." Cole slid eggs onto plates. "That's what partners do." "Partners." Lydia tested the word and found it perfect. "I like that." They ate breakfast on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains and turn the valley gold. The main ranch house was visible in the distance, and Lydia knew they'd need to head over there soon to resume their duties. But for now, for this moment, they were simply two people in love, enjoying their first morning as husband and wife. "Tell me something," Cole said, refilling her coffee. "What did you dream about when you were a little girl? What did you want to be when you grew up?" Lydia thought back to those distant days before her mother died, before hardship and responsibility had narrowed her world. "I wanted to be a teacher. I loved books, loved learning. I imagined having a schoolroom full of children, teaching them to read and write and think. There's a schoolhouse being built in the next valley over. They're looking for a teacher." Cole said it casually, but his eyes were intent on her face. "I'm your wife now. Your place is wherever you want it to be." Cole set down his cup. "Lydia, I didn't marry you to trap you in domestic servitude. If you want to teach, teach. We'll figure it out." "But the ranch house, we'll hire a housekeeper. Hell, we should have already. My mother never had to cook for ranch hands and run a household alone. She had help. So will you." Lydia felt something tight in her chest loosen. "You'd do that? Support me teaching?" "I'd do anything that makes you happy." Cole took her hand. "Our marriage is a partnership, remember? That means we both get to have dreams, both get to pursue what matters to us. Promise me you'll think about it." "I promise." They spent the rest of the morning in their little house, unpacking Lydia's few belongings and making the space truly theirs. Cole showed her the root cellar he'd dug, the chicken coop he'd built, the garden plot waiting to be planted come spring. Everything had been thought of, everything prepared with care. "I want to fill this house with life," Cole said, as they stood in what would someday be a nursery. "Children, laughter, love, but only when you're ready. There's no rush." "I want that too." Lydia leaned into him. A family. A real family. In the afternoon, they walked back to the main ranch house hand in hand. The crew greeted them with grins and good-natured teasing, clearly delighted that their boss had finally found happiness. Ben was up and moving around, his arms still in a sling, but his color much improved. "Good to see you, Mrs. Maddox," he said with a grin. "The boss seems right pleased with married life." "I am," Cole confirmed, pulling Lydia close. "Very pleased indeed." They fell into a new rhythm over the following days. Lydia still cooked and managed the main house, but Cole hired Martha Weston, a widow from town, to help with the heavy cleaning and laundry. This freed Lydia to spend time on other pursuits, including visiting the schoolhouse in the next valley to inquire about the teaching position. The school board was skeptical at first. A married woman teaching was unusual, but when Lydia demonstrated her knowledge and passion, they offered her the job starting after the new year. She would teach 3 days a week, and Cole promised to drive her there and back himself. The weeks turned into a month, and October arrived with a riot of gold and crimson in the aspens. The house by the creek became truly home, filled with small touches that made it theirs. Lydia hung curtains she'd sewn, placed wildflowers in jars on the windowsills, filled the shelves with books they were slowly acquiring. Cole built furniture in the evenings, a rocking chair for the porch, shelves for the kitchen, a chest for storing quilts. They developed rituals, morning coffee on the porch watching the sunrise, evening piano lessons that often ended in kisses and laughter, walks along the creek at sunset, discussing their days and dreams. Saturday trips to town where they were gradually becoming known as a couple, accepted as part of the community. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Lydia realized she'd missed her monthly courses. She'd been so busy, so caught up in the joy of married life that she hadn't noticed. But now, counting back, she realized she was nearly 2 weeks late. "Cole?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He looked up from the book he was reading. Yes, love? I think I might be. She couldn't finish the sentence. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Pregnant? Lydia nodded, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. It's too early to be sure, but Cole was across the room in an instant, dropping to his knees in front of her chair. He placed his hand over hers, over the place where their child might be growing. Are you happy? He asked softly. I know we talked about waiting. I'm terrified and thrilled and so happy I could burst. Lydia laughed through sudden tears. Is that normal? I think that's exactly right. Cole pressed a kiss to her stomach, then looked up at her with wonder in his eyes. A baby. Our baby. We should wait to be certain before we tell anyone. We'll wait. Cole stood and pulled her into his arms. But, Lydia, if you are pregnant, you've given me everything. A home, a purpose, and now maybe a child. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. You already are, Lydia whispered against his chest. You already are. That night, they made love with a new tenderness, aware that Lydia's body might be nurturing the beginning of their family. Afterward, Cole held her close and talked about the future, about teaching their children to ride, to read, to love this wild country as much as they did, about expanding the ranch, building a legacy, creating something that would last beyond their own lives. Lydia listened and dreamed and felt her heart expand to hold all the love she felt for this man, this life, this impossible future that had become wonderfully real. 2 weeks later, Judith Crawford confirmed what they'd suspected. Lydia was indeed pregnant, due sometime in late May or early June. The news spread through the community like wildfire, and suddenly Lydia found herself the center of attention, receiving advice and gifts and good wishes from women she barely knew. Cole was insufferably proud and protective, hovering until Lydia laughingly told him she wasn't made of glass. But she loved his attention, loved the way his hand found her stomach constantly, loved the awe in his eyes when he looked at her. The winter came early that year, covering the valley in snow and turning the mountains into white-capped giants. Lydia and Cole settled into their small house, cozy and warm, reading by the fire and making plans. She started teaching in January and found joy in shaping young minds, in passing on the love of learning her own mother had given her. The pregnancy progressed normally despite some morning sickness that left Lydia exhausted. Cole was endlessly patient, bringing her tea and crackers in bed, taking on extra household duties without complaint. He turned the spare bedroom into a nursery, crafting a beautiful cradle from pine and painting the walls a soft yellow that reminded Lydia of sunshine. Spring arrived slowly, melting snow giving way to wildflowers and green grass. Lydia's belly swelled with their child, and she had to stop teaching in April when the ride became too uncomfortable. She spent her days at the ranch house with Martha, sewing baby clothes and preparing for the arrival. May came in warm and clear, and Lydia felt the baby moving constantly now, a sensation both strange and wonderful. Cole talked to her stomach every night, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch, about his parents, about the legacy they would inherit. You're going to be so loved, he whispered one night, his hand splayed across her belly. So very loved. He or she already is, Lydia replied, covering his hand with hers. They'd built something neither had imagined possible that day at the train station. Not just a marriage or a home or a family, but a life filled with love and purpose and belonging. A life worth living, worth fighting for, worth celebrating every single day. As Lydia drifted off to sleep that night, safe in Cole's arms and carrying their child, she thought back to the desperate woman who'd stepped off the train 9 months ago. That woman had been looking for security, for survival, for a man to save her. Instead, she'd saved herself. And in doing so, she'd found everything she'd never dared to dream. The first labor pain caught Lydia while she was hanging laundry in the early morning sunshine of June 3rd. She'd felt restless all night, unable to get comfortable, and had risen before dawn to work in the garden, driven by a nesting instinct she couldn't explain. The pain started low in her back, then wrapped around her middle like a tightening band. She gripped the clothesline and breathed through it, remembering what Judith had told her about what to expect. When it passed, she looked around for Cole and found him by the barn talking to Miguel about a horse that had thrown a shoe. Cole, she called, keeping her voice calm. I think it's time. His head snapped up, and even from 50 yards away, she could see his face go pale. He said something to Miguel, then started running toward her, covering the distance in seconds. Are you sure? How long have you been having pains? That was the first one. Lydia smiled at his panic. We have time. First babies take hours, remember? But we should probably send for Judith. Right, yes, Judith. Cole looked around wildly. Tom! Tom, ride into town and get Mrs. Crawford. Tell her the baby's coming. And get Doc Morrison too, just in case. Tom appeared from the barn, took one look at Lydia's face, and was on his horse in seconds, riding hard for Silver Ridge. Cole put his arm around Lydia's waist. Let's get you inside. You should be lying down. I'd rather walk, actually. Moving is supposed to help. Lydia leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. But maybe we should go to our house instead of the main ranch. I'd like to have the baby in our home. Whatever you want. Cole's hand was shaking where it rested on her hip. God, Lydia, I'm terrified. So am I. She squeezed his hand. But we'll get through it together. They walked slowly to the house by the creek, and Cole helped her inside. Another pain hit as they entered the bedroom, stronger this time, stealing Lydia's breath. Cole held her through it, his face etched with worry and helplessness. I wish I could do this for you, he said when it passed. I know. Lydia touched his cheek. But this is my part. Your part comes later, teaching our child to ride and read and be brave. The pains came more regularly as the morning progressed. Lydia walked circles around the house, pausing when each contraction hit, breathing through them while Cole watched with increasing anxiety. He tried to hide it, tried to be strong for her, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Judith arrived in a whirlwind of efficiency, her saddlebags full of supplies, Martha Weston and Sarah Chen behind her. She took one look at Lydia and nodded with satisfaction. Good, strong labor. You're doing fine, child. She turned to Cole. Now you, out. This is women's work. I'm not leaving her. Cole's voice was firm. Judith raised an eyebrow. Most men prefer to wait outside. I'm not most men. Cole moved to Lydia's side. I'm staying unless Lydia wants me to go. Stay, Lydia said immediately. Please stay. Then stay you will. Judith smiled slightly. I should have known. You Maddox men were always stubborn. Your father refused to leave your mother's side, too. The afternoon wore on. The pains grew stronger, closer together, until Lydia could barely catch her breath between them. She walked until she couldn't walk anymore, then took to the bed, gripping Cole's hand so hard she was sure she must be crushing his fingers. But he never complained, never flinched, just stayed beside her and told her how strong she was, how proud he was, how much he loved her. I can't do this, Lydia gasped after one particularly brutal contraction. Cole, it's too much. I can't. Yes, you can. He pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. You're the bravest person I know. You crossed a continent alone. You stood up to Harold Bishop. You built a life from nothing. You can do this. He's right, Judith said, checking her progress. And you're almost there, child. Another hour, maybe 2, and you'll be holding your baby. 2 hours? Lydia wanted to weep. I don't have 2 hours left in me. Yes, you do. Cole kissed her forehead. And I'll be right here for every second of it. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, when Judith finally declared it was time to push. Lydia was exhausted beyond measure, her body wrung out, her mind fuzzy with fatigue. But when Judith told her to push, she gathered what strength remained and bore down with everything she had. Cole supported her from behind, taking her weight, whispering encouragement in her ear. That's it, love. You're so strong. Just a little more. Our baby is almost here. I can see the head, Sarah said excitedly. Dark hair, lots of it. One more big push, Judith commanded. Come on, Lydia. Bring your baby into the world. Lydia pushed with every ounce of strength she possessed, feeling her body stretch and tear, feeling pressure and pain, and then suddenly, blessedly, release. A thin wail filled the room, indignant and loud, and Lydia collapsed back against Cole, tears streaming down her face. It's a girl, Judith announced, her voice thick with emotion. A beautiful, perfect girl. Lydia watched through blurred vision as Judith cleaned the baby, as Sarah cut the cord, as Martha wrapped the tiny form in soft blankets. Then Judith was placing the baby in her arms, and Lydia looked down at her daughter for the first time. She was perfect. Impossibly, miraculously perfect. Tiny rosebud mouth, eyes squeezed shut, a cap of dark hair plastered to her skull. Her little fists waved in the air, and when Lydia touched one, the tiny fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength. "Hello, sweetheart," Lydia whispered. "Hello, little one. I'm your mama." Cole leaned over her shoulder and Lydia heard his breath catch. When she looked up at him, tears were streaming down his face unashamed. "She's beautiful," he said hoarsely. "Lydia, she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Would you like to hold your daughter?" Lydia asked. Cole's hand shook as he took the baby, cradling her against his chest with infinite care. He looked down at her with such wonder, such love, that Lydia felt her heart might burst. "Elizabeth," Cole said softly. "I'd like to name her Elizabeth Rose, after my mother and you, if that's all right." "It's perfect." Lydia wiped her eyes. "Elizabeth Rose Maddox. Welcome to the world, Eliza." The baby opened her eyes at the sound of her name, and Lydia gasped. They were blue, dark blue like her father's, and they seemed to look right into Cole's soul. "Hello, little Elizabeth," Cole whispered. "I'm your papa, and I promise you I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how loved you are, how wanted, how precious." Judith cleared her throat softly. "I need to tend to Lydia now. Sarah, take that baby and let her papa get reacquainted with her in the other room." Cole reluctantly handed Eliza to Sarah, then turned back to Lydia. He took her hand and brought it to his lips. "You're amazing. Do you know that? Absolutely amazing." "I couldn't have done it without you." Lydia's voice was drowsy with exhaustion. "Thank you for staying. There's nowhere else I would have been." Judith shooed him out then, and Lydia submitted to being cleaned and checked and settled into fresh sheets. By the time the women were finished, night had fallen completely, and Lydia was struggling to keep her eyes open. "Sleep now," Judith ordered. "Your daughter is fine with her papa. Rest while you can, because once that baby realizes she's hungry, you won't be getting much sleep for a while." Lydia wanted to protest, wanted to hold her daughter again, but exhaustion dragged her under like a tide. She slept deeply, dreamlessly, and woke to find pale dawn light filtering through the curtains, and Cole sitting in the rocking chair beside the bed, Eliza cradled in his arms. He was singing softly, a lullaby Lydia recognized as one his mother had sung to him. His voice was rough but tender, and the baby seemed mesmerized by it, her dark blue eyes fixed on her father's face. "You're a natural," Lydia said quietly. Cole looked up with a smile. "She hasn't cried once all night, just looks around at everything with these serious eyes, like she's trying to figure out the world already. She's hungry, though, I can tell." Lydia pushed herself up carefully, wincing at the soreness. "Bring her here." Cole placed Eliza in her arms, and Lydia fumbled with her nightgown, trying to remember everything Judith had told her about nursing. The baby found what she needed with surprising efficiency, latching on and suckling strongly. "Well, she certainly knows what she wants," Cole said with a laugh. "She's a Maddox." Lydia stroked the baby's soft cheek. Stubborn and determined. They sat together in the quiet morning, watching their daughter nurse, and Lydia felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it, not security or status or even survival. This, love, family, belonging. "I can't believe she's really here," Cole said wonderingly. "For 9 months I knew she was coming, but now that she's here, now that I can hold her and see her, it doesn't seem real." "I know what you mean." Lydia looked down at Eliza's perfect face. "I keep thinking I'll wake up, and this will all be a dream. The ranch, you, her, everything." "Not a dream." Cole leaned over and kissed her gently. "Very real, very ours, very forever." The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves. Eliza was a good baby, but she still needed constant attention. Lydia learned to nurse, to change diapers, to soothe cries in the middle of the night. Cole helped with everything, getting up for night feedings, rocking Eliza when Lydia needed to rest, learning to change diapers with the same focused determination he brought to breaking horses. The community rallied around them. Judith visited daily at first, making sure both mother and baby were thriving. Mary brought meals and advice. Sarah sewed tiny dresses and blankets. Even the ranch hands were besotted, fighting over who got to hold the baby when they came to the main house for meals. "She's got every man on this ranch wrapped around her little finger already," Tom said one evening, gently bouncing Eliza on his knee. "God help you when she's 16, Cole." "Don't remind me." Cole watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. "I'll probably lock her in her room and shoot any boy who comes near." "You'll do no such thing," Lydia said firmly. "You'll teach her to be strong and smart and to choose wisely, just like your mother taught you." Summer deepened into August, and Lydia gradually regained her strength. She took Eliza everywhere with her, working in the garden with the baby in a basket nearby, cooking with Eliza strapped to her chest in a sling Sarah had made. The baby thrived, growing plump and happy, her dark blue eyes taking in everything with keen intelligence. Cole was besotted. He spent every spare moment with his daughter, talking to her about the ranch, the horses, the mountains. He taught her to grip his finger, to follow objects with her eyes, to smile at the sound of his voice. Lydia would find them together at odd hours, Cole holding Eliza up to the window to show her the sunrise, whispering secrets and promises. "I never knew I could love anyone this much," he confessed one night, as they lay in bed with Eliza sleeping between them in a little nest of blankets. "Except you. I love you both so much it terrifies me." "Good terrified or bad terrified?" Lydia asked, stroking Eliza's soft hair. "Both." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Loving you, loving her, it means having something to lose, and I know what loss feels like. It hollows you out." "Then we'll just have to take care of each other." Lydia reached across their sleeping daughter to take his hand. "All three of us, looking out for each other. Deal?" "Deal." The ranch prospered as summer turned to fall. The cattle were fat, the horses strong, the harvest abundant. Cole hired 2 more permanent hands, expanding operations into the next valley. He and Tom began talking about building a second bunkhouse, about establishing breeding programs for their horses, about the future in terms of decades rather than seasons. Lydia returned to teaching part-time in September, bringing Eliza with her. The school children were enchanted by the baby, and Lydia found she could teach with her daughter in a sling on her back, rocking gently as she wrote on the chalkboard. The school board had been skeptical at first, but when they saw that Lydia's teaching hadn't suffered, they grudgingly approved. October arrived with its riot of color, and Lydia realized with a start that it had been a year since she'd stepped off that train. A year since Harold Bishop had rejected her, since Cole had offered her work, since her life had changed completely. She and Cole celebrated their first anniversary quietly, just the two of them and Eliza, with a picnic by the creek where their house stood. They ate fried chicken and fresh bread and apple pie and watched their daughter chase shadows on a blanket. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Cole asked, pulling Lydia close against his side. "When I found you at the station?" "I called Harold Bishop a coward." "Before that, after I offered you the job." Cole smiled at the memory. "You asked me why I was being so kind, and I told you because someone should, because you deserved it." "I remember. I was right." Cole turned to face her fully. "You did deserve kindness. You deserved everything good. And Lydia, you've given me so much more than I've given you. You've given me a home, a family, a reason to smile every single day. You've made me better than I was." "We've made each other better." Lydia kissed him softly. "That's what love does." They sat watching Eliza until the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The baby babbled happily, reaching for leaves that drifted down from the aspens. She was trying to sit up now, determined and frustrated when she toppled over. "She's going to be a handful," Lydia predicted, "just like her mother." Cole caught Eliza as she tipped sideways, stubborn and brave and absolutely beautiful. Winter came early that year, covering the valley in snow by November. Lydia and Cole settled into domestic contentment, spending long evenings by the fire with Eliza between them. Cole read aloud while Lydia sewed, their daughter playing with wooden blocks Tom had carved for her. Sometimes Cole played the piano, and Eliza would bounce in Lydia's lap, already showing a love of music. Christmas was magical. They decorated the house with pine boughs and holly, and Cole surprised Lydia with a beautiful new dress from Denver. She gave him a leather-bound journal for recording ranch business and family memories. For Eliza, there were carved animals and soft dolls, though she was still too young to appreciate them. The entire ranch celebrated together, hands and families gathering at the main house for a feast that took days to prepare. There was music and laughter and storytelling, and Lydia looked around at the faces she'd come to know and love, feeling blessed beyond measure. "Thank you," she whispered to Cole as they watched the festivities. "For what?" "For seeing me, for choosing me, for building this life with me." Cole pulled her close. "Best decision I ever made." The years began to pass in a golden blur of happiness and hard work. Eliza grew from baby to toddler, tottering around on chubby legs, getting into everything, charming everyone she met. She had her father's eyes and her mother's determination, and by the time she was 2, she was already begging to ride the horses. "Absolutely not," Lydia said firmly when Cole suggested putting her on a gentle mare. "She's a natural," Cole protested. "Look at how she reaches for the reins." "She's 2 years old. She can wait until she's at least 4. They compromised at 3, and Cole built a special saddle that would keep Eliza secure. Lydia's heart was in her throat the first time she watched her daughter on horseback, but Cole led the mare slowly around the corral, one hand always on Eliza, and the little girl's delighted laughter eased Lydia's fears. When Eliza was 3, Lydia realized she was pregnant again. Cole was overjoyed, though this time he was even more protective, insisting she rest more, do less, let him handle everything. Lydia tolerated it with patience, knowing it came from love. Their son was born in April, a few weeks early but healthy and strong. They named him Daniel Thomas, after Cole's father and Tom, who'd become like family. He had his mother's brown hair and a calm temperament that was the opposite of his sister's fiery nature. Eliza was fascinated by her baby brother, constantly wanting to help, to hold him, to show him things. Lydia watched her daughter with Daniel and saw echoes of the family she'd lost, the family she'd rebuilt, the family that would continue long after she was gone. The ranch continued to prosper. Cole expanded operations, bought adjacent land, established breeding programs that became renowned across 3 territories. The Maddox Ranch became one of the most successful in Colorado, and Cole became known as a fair boss, an honest dealer, a man whose word was bond. Lydia continued teaching, though now only 2 days a week, bringing both children with her. The schoolhouse had been expanded, and she had an assistant teacher, a young woman named Emma who'd come west for adventure and stayed for the community. Time moved differently now, marked not by seasons but by milestones. Eliza's first day of real school, Daniel's first steps, the addition to the house that gave them 2 more bedrooms, the bad winter that tested everyone's resolve, the good harvest that paid for new equipment, the birth of a 3rd child, another girl they named Margaret, after Lydia's sister, with golden hair and a laugh like bells. Through it all, Cole and Lydia grew not apart, but closer, their love deepening with each shared challenge, each celebrated triumph. They still had their evening talks on the porch. They still played piano together, though now with children singing along. They still found moments to steal away to their little house by the creek, which had become a sanctuary when they needed time alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked one evening when they were alone, the children sleeping peacefully in the main house with Martha watching them. "Choosing this life? Choosing me?" Lydia looked at him in genuine surprise. "Regret? Cole, this life has given me everything I ever wanted and things I didn't know I could want. How could I regret any of it? Sometimes I worry that you gave up too much. Your teaching could have been more if you weren't managing a household and raising children. I could have what? Been alone in Boston? Married to Harold Bishop and miserable? Cole, I chose this. I choose it every single day, and I would choose it again and again. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts." Lydia took his hand. "The hard parts are what made us strong, what taught us what we're capable of. I wouldn't trade a single moment." "Not even that first day at the train station?" Lydia smiled. "Especially not that day. That's the day I met you. That's the day everything changed." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as their own, finding pleasure in the connection as much as the act itself. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Lydia thought about the journey that had brought her here. She'd come west desperate and alone, looking for security. Instead, she'd found purpose. She'd found love. She had found herself. The years continued to unfold. Eliza grew into a stunning young woman with her father's determination and her mother's kindness, eventually marrying a neighboring rancher's son in a wedding that brought together families from across the territory. Daniel became his father's right hand on the ranch, steady and capable, with plans to expand operations even further. Margaret discovered a talent for painting, capturing the beauty of the mountains and valley in ways that left people breathless. The ranch grew with the family. More land, more cattle, more horses. A reputation for quality and integrity that brought buyers from as far as California. Employee families who built homes on Maddox land, creating a small community that looked out for each other. Cole's hair turned silver, and lines deepened around his eyes. But he still had the strength to work alongside his men, still had the gentleness to hold his grandchildren, still had the capacity to look at Lydia across a crowded room and make her feel like she was the only person in the world. Lydia's hands grew rough from work, her body softened by childbearing, her face marked by time and sun. But Cole still looked at her like she was beautiful, still reached for her in the night, still told her he loved her every single day. One golden evening in late September, exactly 10 years after their wedding, they stood on the porch of the house by the creek watching their children play in the meadow. Eliza was home visiting with her husband and baby daughter. Daniel was teaching Margaret to rope fence posts. The sounds of laughter and life filled the air. "Any regrets, Mrs. Maddox?" Cole asked softly, echoing a question he'd asked 100 times before. Lydia leaned into him, watching the sun set over the mountains she'd come to love, listening to the creek that had sung her to sleep for 10 years, surrounded by the family they'd built together. "Not one," she said, just as she always did. "I found my home the moment you offered me yours." Cole pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Best day of my life when you stepped off that train." "Second best," Lydia corrected, smiling up at him. "Best day was when you asked me to marry you." "No." Cole turned her in his arms so she faced him, his winter blue eyes warm with love. "Best day is today. And tomorrow will be better. And the day after that, better still. Because every day I get to wake up beside you, every day I get to build this life with you, is the best day of my life." Tears pricked Lydia's eyes. "You romantic." "Only for you." Cole kissed her softly. "Only ever for you." They stood together as the sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, as their children's laughter echoed across the valley, as the mountains stood eternal watch over the land they'd claimed as home. The mail-order bride who'd been rejected at the station and the rancher who'd defended her honor had built something that would outlast them both. They'd built a legacy of love, of honor, of choosing each other every single day. They'd built a family that would carry their values forward into generations they'd never meet. They'd built a home not just of wood and stone, but of laughter and tears, of hard work and celebration, of ordinary moments made extraordinary by being shared. And through it all, they'd proven that sometimes the best things in life come not from the plans we make, but from the courage to embrace the unexpected, to trust in kindness, to believe in second chances. Lydia Marston had come west looking for security and found love instead. Cole Maddox had offered her work and found his heart's home. Together, they'd built something neither could have built alone. As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge, Cole and Lydia walked hand in hand back to where their children waited, ready for one more evening of story and song, one more night of being together, one more day of the beautiful life they'd created. And in the morning, they would wake up and do it all over again, building their life one choice, one moment, one day at a time. Because that's what love was. Not the grand gesture or the perfect moment, but the daily decision to keep choosing each other, to keep building together, to keep believing that the best was yet to come. The cowboy who'd loved her before she ever arrived had taught her that. And every day for the rest of their lives, Lydia made sure he knew how grateful she was that he'd found the courage to stand up, to speak out, to offer her not just work, but hope. The train that had brought her west was long forgotten, its route traveled by countless others seeking their own fortunes. But the story of the mail-order bride and the rancher who'd saved her became legend in Silver Ridge, told and retold until it took on the patina of myth. The real story, though, was simpler and more profound. Two lonely people had found each other. Two broken hearts had healed together. Two separate lives had merged into something greater than either could have been alone. And that, in the end, was everything that mattered.